Something weird but at the same time exciting was going on in Saudi Arabia this exact summer. Clubs went off the leash, started throwing money around and attract top football players and coaches from Europe. Karim Benzema has traded Real Madrid for Al Ittihad. The reason is very justified. A 2-year contract for 200 million. Neymar, Kante, Milinkovic-Savic, Firmino, Edouard Mendy, Koulibaly, Brozovic, Gerrard and Bilic, they all chose Saudi Arabia. And that's not even the whole list. Many players and coaches are still on the radar of local clubs. Some have already declined, some are negotiating, and some are still thinking. By the way, Leo Messi was also very much wanted in Saudi Arabia and reportedly offered more than 500 million euros per season. Leo refused and went to the States to play for David Beckham's Inter Miami. At the same time, the Saudi Arabian League is not yet at the highest level. The 21st Group Agency ranks it 58th in the world. That is, it's roughly comparable to the Scottish League and the Italian Serie A. But Saudi Arabia has announced its ambitions and desire to get into the top 10, with Ronaldo even saying it will be in top 5. All of this is very interesting, but what is the football boom in Saudi Arabia actually related to? Where is the money coming from? We already had an example of China. Will this bubble burst? I'll attempt to answer these questions. I haven't seen anything like this on YouTube, so watch till the very end. Today, Saudi Arabia is a wealthy country with a high standard of living, and its capital, Riyadh, is a futuristic metropolis. Their GDP is over $1 trillion per year, and the average salary is around $2,000. The main source of income is oil. Saudi Arabia still has enormous reserves of the resource, but it wasn't always like this. Before the discovery of reserves in 1938, life was very different. At the time of its founding in 1932, when 4 kingdoms merged into one state, Saudi Arabia was one of the poorest countries in the world, earning money through pilgrimage and agriculture. There were no cars, electricity, roads, infrastructure, or hospitals in the country. Most Saudis were illiterate with low life expectancy. The majority even ate raw food to survive. After the discovery of oil reserves, Saudi Arabia began to prosper economically and gain political influence on the international stage. By 1976, the country had become the world's largest exporter of oil. Along with this, Saudi Arabia developed economically, leading to a complete transformation that brought quality healthcare, education, and a good standard of living. Despite this evolution and growth in prosperity, Saudi Arabia still depends heavily, if not entirely, on oil resources. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman understands this well. The scale of the problem helped to realize the fluctuations in oil prices. The first major drop occurred in 2014, and when the price of oil fell below $30 per barrel in early 2016, Mohammed bin Salman presented the strategic plan, Vision 2030. According to it, Saudi Arabia's economy should stop relying entirely on oil products by 2030. The plan covers many things. The main thing is to increase non-oil revenues 6-fold and almost double foreign investments. It also plans to reduce unemployment to 7%, increase the percentage of women in the workforce from 22 to 30. For Saudi Arabia as an Islamic country, this is an unusual step. Carry out tax reform and implement a host of cultural programs to make country even more open. For travelers, entry rules have been simplified, and from 2023, it will be possible to visit the kingdom on a transit visa when transferring in Riyadh. The key part of the new strategy is sports. Mohammed bin Salman sees it as a tool for attracting attention, building new political ties, and improving the country's image. An important link with the interaction with the world of sports is the Public Investment Fund, PIF, of Saudi Arabia. The fund's assets exceed $600 billion. The PIF's task is to invest money on behalf of the Saudi Arabian government intelligently. The fund has stakes in Tesla, Boeing, Electronic Arts, Uber, and many other companies. It was the PIF that bought Newcastle United. All major sports deals in the country go through the fund, in golf, motorsports, football, and other sports. If you remember, the Spanish and Italian Super Cups were held in Saudi Arabia. Formula 1 takes place there. Usyk and Joshua fought twice in the country. Don't be surprised if the World Cup in 2030 takes place in Saudi Arabia. This brings us to the fact that football, as the most popular sport, is also an important part of the Vision 2030 plan. All clubs in Saudi Arabia are owned by the state. Therefore, without a clear and long-term program, no one would rush to buy European stars. In June, the Saudi Arabian government announced that its sovereign fund had bought 75% of the shares in 4 out of 18 league teams, Al Hilal and Al Nasr in Riyadh, and Al Ahly and Al Ittihad in Jeddah. It's the PIF that coordinates the purchase of footballers in Europe, aiming to sign at least 3 for each of the 4 clubs. In addition to the PIF, 4 other state-owned companies have invested in 4 other teams. For example, Al Ittifaq, which does not belong to the fund, invited Steven Gerrard to be the head coach. Yes, for now, clubs and the entire championship are living on state money, but the authorities hope to make them more attractive for investment and eventually sell them. To do this, in 2016, Saudi Arabia developed a program to privatize football clubs. That is, a transition from state management to private. This process was planned to be completed by 2020, but the deadlines had to be shifted. The process was moving slowly, and then COVID happened. In early June 2023, the Saudi news agency published a press release stating that privatization would begin later this year. It is planned to be carried out smoothly. First, they will sell several clubs and open up the opportunity to invest only for local investors and later for foreign ones. It is expected that by 2030, at least 4 or 5 clubs will be transferred to private investors. To attract investors, you need to create an attractive product, and this is impossible without investments from the state, said political scientist and psychologist Mohammed Al-Saleh. The country has money, but everyone understands that it's impossible to allocate funds for football forever. Clubs need to be transferred to private hands, but no one will come where there is nothing but a desire for someone to invest. Prospects are needed, and for these, the state spends huge amounts of money annually. We are talking about billions of dollars. Although football fits well into the Saudi Arabia strategic plan, human rights activists believe that the kingdom is using sports to launder its image. They regularly accuse Saudi Arabia of human rights violations. And the name of bin Salman is associated with repression, the invasion of troops in Yemen, and the killings of opposing figures and dissidents. In 2018, journalist Jamal Khashoggi entered the Saudi Arabian embassy in Istanbul and disappeared. As it turned out, he was killed. Prince Salman said he was not involved in the death of the journalist who criticized him. Therefore, Saudi Arabian authorities may be hoping to improve the country's reputation by inviting European stars and investing in a game that billions of people are crazy about. For example, Messi has a contract for 30 million euros a year just for going on vacation to Saudi Arabia and promoting it on social media. Currently, TV presenters Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville are strongly criticizing Saudi Arabia. Neville even suggested imposing an embargo on transfers to the kingdom. Saudi have taken over golf, the big boxing fights, now they want to take over football. This sport's washing needs to be stopped, said Carragher. In 1975, 34-year-old Pele was finishing his career and decided to sign a big contract with the New York Cosmos in the emerging North American Soccer League, NASL. The club clearly made the right choice. The Brazilian scored 37 goals in 64 games, and soon NASL became an attractive place for top players at the end of their careers. They brought in Gerd Müller, George Best, and even Johan Cruyff. And although NASL collapsed in 1984, and was later replaced by MLS, the idea of raising the league status through high-profile transfers gained momentum. As you can see, it's not new at all. Japan and Australia used this strategy moderately, but quite successfully. But China loudly burst onto the scene, taking players on crazy contracts, but failed miserably. It all ended in bankruptcies, corruption, scandals, and the lack of visible improvements in the level of football in the country. There is an opinion that Saudi Arabia is the new China. The system of buying players who have barely finished their careers is now what develops football. There was a similar mistake in China, said UEFA President Alexander Seferin recently. At first glance, everything really resembles China. A sudden boom, huge transfer sums, and big contracts, but don't rush to make conclusions. Let's figure it out. According to one version, the football boom in China was caused by the country's leader and Communist Party Secretary General Xi Jinping. He once said that he had 3 football wishes: to qualify for the World Cup for the second time, to host it, and ultimately to win it. He was onto something, to say the least. They say that because of this, big businesses, especially developers seeking political benefits, intervened, took over clubs, and spared no money. In early October 2014, at a meeting of the State Council of China, a sports development plan was adopted. It included reducing state influence and attracting private investments. Business was stimulated by reducing the profit tax from 25 to 3% for companies investing in sports and culture development. After that, corporations began actively buying clubs. For example, Alibaba acquired half of the rights to Guangzhou Evergrande for $192 million. After that, star players flocked to China, where they were offered huge salaries. Axel Witsel, Ezequiel Avessi, Carlos Tevez, Oscar Hulk, Stepan El Sharawi, Marwan Fellaini, Javier Mascherano, and Yannick Carrasco are just a few of those who decided to move to Asia. Tevez called his time in China a holiday, but the holiday didn't last long. Within 3 years, football clubs were under deep and thorough investigation. The authorities were concerned that huge sums were leaving China, filling the pockets of European clubs, players and agents. High-profile transfers and abnormal spending on salaries did not bring result. The expenses of Chinese Super League clubs are about 10 times higher than those of the South Korean K-League and 3 times higher than those of the Japanese J-League. But our national team lags far behind them, complained Shen Xuyan, president of the Chinese Football Association. In 2017, China tightened its limits on foreign players. Now only 4 foreigners could be registered for the match and only 3 could be on the field. One of them must represent Asia. Age restrictions were also introduced. At least 2 players under the age of 23 must be included in the squad, with at least 1 starting. Here's the latest salary cap. Foreigners can earn no more than 3 million euros per year without bonuses, and local players no more than 625,000 euros. Domestic players can only earn money in yuan. Taking into account all salaries and bonuses, the club cannot spend more than $75 million per year on this item, of which only 10 million can be paid to foreigners. But the limit and salary caps were a necessary measure. The problem was that Chinese clubs were spending a lot, earning little, and sitting in the internal multi-million losses. The slowdown in economic growth, especially in the overheated real estate market, became a major break, and most clubs were fully or partially owned by real estate companies. The pandemic made the situation even worse, and all this led to some clubs simply stopping to exist. As a result, huge investments and almost no effect. The level of the championship did not significantly increase, and the Chinese national team did not even qualify for the World Cup in Qatar. And now let's figure out the difference between China and Saudi Arabia. Firstly, football is a part of a deeper strategy in Saudi Arabia aimed at reducing the share of oil revenues. Secondly, there is a version that China simply couldn't realize the potential of transfers of star football players. The country has banned major social networks and YouTube. For example, Ronaldo's transfer brought Al Nassr several million subscribers, increased interest in the club, and therefore increased the value of advertising contracts. This directly affects the club income. Besides, broadcasters are motivated to buy TV rights. China had a problem with this. China's experience has nothing to do with ours. It was purely marketing. Soccer is not very popular there. In Arabia, we have a state project, and it will not be limited to 4 great teams, but to all of them. Because the passion of the Saudis for football knows no limits, said Hafiz Al-Medley, representative of the Asian Football Confederation. The future of football in Saudi Arabia remains to be seen, but their sudden and powerful impact on the market shows potential for long-term success. Some may view the Saudi Arabia League as a bubble, but their strategy aims to reduce reliance on oil revenues, and football is a state project involving all clubs. Only time will tell if the investments pay off, but the passion of Saudis for football is undeniable. Share your thoughts on the matter, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. As usual, see you next week. Until then, know the ball.